Hello. Today we are going to be talking about my nemesis, the onion. I know it might sound weird that I am making a video called How to Grow Onions from Seed while calling an onion my nemesis, but I've been growing these for quite a few years now, and this is actually a store-bought onion, but this is about the size that I'm able to grow my onions to, but I'm really looking to try and grow those big onions. And so this video is a mix of a how-to, but it's also going to be a documentation of how my onions do this year, because this is the year of the onion. What is up? My name is Bree from Urban Gardening Canada, and I garden in Ottawa, Zone 5. I have been growing onions for a few years now. They haven't been amazing, and this year I am convinced that it's going to be my year. And so I did a bunch of research on how to grow onions, and I am going to be applying all of that research in my garden season this year. And so I'm going to take you along the journey throughout the remaining months once they get planted outside. But for today's video, I am going to take you through everything you need to know about onions, from what types of seeds to buy to how to plant them. So let's get into today's topic. Okay, so first up, I've got a few different seed packets here, but the first thing that you want to know is the type of onions that you have to buy. And so I have 3 different onions here from 3 different companies, and I'm surprised that none of them actually label the type of onion that it is. And so there's actually 3 types of onions. There's long day onions, intermediate, and short day onions. And I had always been confused about this because I grow here in Canada. And so I thought that I needed short day onions because I have a short season, but it's actually the opposite. I have a short season with really long days of sunshine, and so that is why I need to have actually long day onions. And so there's a couple different things you can do. You can hope that the seed packet tells you if it's a long day onion. I also bought this specific seed packet from a local seed grower in Quebec. So I would assume that they're growing varieties to get seeds that actually work for our environment, since Quebec has a really similar environment to Ottawa. I have these red globe onions from OSC, and they also don't mention if they are, what type of onion they are. And the Ontario Seed Company, I again would also hope is selling the right type of onions for Canada. And then I bought this brand, this Mackenzie Canada seeds, and they also don't mention if they are long or short day. And this one is interesting because it says this variety is called Candy, and it says 85 days to harvest. But when I was searching it online when trying to decide to buy these seeds, it actually said on the internet that the days to harvest is somewhere like 120 days. And so I'm really unsure how this one is gonna go. It says it's one of the best storage onions, making an excellent choice for Canadian gardeners. So apart from whether the label tells you if it's long, short, or intermediate day, the days to maturity should also help you decide that. So long day onions want a long day, which is around 15 hours of sunlight, and they should be ready to harvest around 90 days from planting outside. Intermediate onions are looking for 12 hours of sun and want approximately 110 days to maturity to harvest it. And short day onions are 110 days to maturity and 10 hours of sunlight. And so I checked here in Ottawa, I checked what our longest day of the year is, and we get somewhere close to that, but not for very long. I think on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, we're like just breaching that 15 hours. And so I do think that there's a possibility of growing intermediate onions here in the Southern Ontario or Eastern Ontario area, because we're actually quite south compared to a lot of other cities in Canada. And so just check your longest day of the year and how many hours of sun you get, because you might be growing intermediate ones like me if you're in the GTA, or you could try and do long day ones. But if you're anywhere else in Canada, I recommend doing the long day onions, and if you're in the Southern Ontario area, you could probably get away with the intermediate ones. So another important thing to know about onion seeds is that they have a really short shelf life. So your seed packet will only last about a year, maybe 2 years. And so this one is empty, thankfully, because I've had it for too long, and I bought this one for last year's season, and I planted seeds and already I got like a 10% germination rate. So when I plant these ones today, I'm just gonna dump the whole seed packet into my soil because it really doesn't matter anymore. They're gone to garbage anyway, so I may as well dump the entire seed packet in and see how many germinate. And then I bought these ones this year, so I'm gonna also be growing these ones. And I'm gonna grow them at the allotment because I have a really good spot for them beside my garlic. And the thing about onions is they want full sun. So because we need that 15 hours or the 12 hours of sunlight, you wanna make sure that wherever you're planting them in a full sun location. And I think that that has been one of my issues in the past is I've been intercropping mine. So anywhere where I can find space, I've kind of been dropping an onion here or there the way that I do with leeks. And leeks are totally fine with that, but the onions haven't been because they get shaded out by all of the other plants that I'm growing it with. And so I think that's been one of my biggest problems so far the past few growing years that I've had. And so I'm definitely gonna change that and grow it at the allotment where I know I get full sun and see how that works. So when you're sowing these into the soil, you do wanna lightly cover them. You can plant them really tight together. So I just use a single container of soil and I dump my seeds into it and then just lightly cover them with soil on top of it and make sure that the soil is well watered. And then if you have a heat mat, that's the best place that you can be putting it so that way they germinate quickly, although it is not necessary. You can also use a heat register, but I just am very careful because a heat register is an uncontrolled temperature, so it's really important that you watch for that. So it's totally fine if you don't have a heat mat. You can just plant your seeds directly in the soil, cover it with a dome or a lid, and then just wait about a week to 10 days for them to germinate. And if you do have a heat mat, they'll germinate likely in like 2 to 3 days. It really speeds up the process, but it isn't necessary. So here in Canada, you do want to start your onion seeds early, which is why I have this video out now, because you want to start your onions anywhere in January or February. And that's because onions can handle cool weather, and so you do want to get them out as early as possible. Because the longest day of the year is in the 3rd week of June, you want to make sure that you're capitalizing on those really long days. And so the earlier you can get your onions out, the better for it to be able to use that sunshine. So getting it out in sometime in April or early May is really good, so you get that really strong sunshine in June into the parts of July, so that way you can harvest them. And again, onions want full sun. They also love high nitrogen in their soil, so make sure that you plant them in a place that has a good amount of nitrogen and that you are feeding them throughout the season. And then also they love water. And I am a very bad waterer, but it rains a ton here in Ottawa, so I know that the watering was never my issue. The sun, I was putting it in the shade a little bit, shaded out by plants, so I know that is an issue. And I absolutely was not feeding them enough nitrogen, so I can guarantee that was a big part of why my onions have always come out small. And so that is 100% something I am going to be changing for this season. I was curious to know what you like to use your onions for most. Do you eat them raw in sandwiches or on burgers, or are you just trying them for the first time? If you could leave a comment below, I would love to hear from you. Okay, so once you have planted your seeds in the soil, you are going to want to put the dome on top of them, leave them to germinate, and as soon as you see them sprouting, you're going to want to pull that lid off of it and have a grow light on top of them. And your grow light should only be a couple inches above your seedlings. And don't worry if you pack them in really tight. Onions are really, really simple to separate. They have quite large roots and they don't tangle very easily, so it's really simple to separate them after the fact. So this is why it's totally fine to seed them really thickly together in a single pot of soil. Once you take the lid off of your seedlings, the soil is going to start drying out a lot faster, so you need to make sure you're on top of that because onions don't like dry soil. They like a lot of water, so you're going to want to stay on top of watering your seedlings. And once they have been growing for about 2 weeks, you're going to want to fertilize it for the first time with a really weak fertilizer. And so If you are going to try and successfully grow onions like me, it's going to be important to be documenting when you planted your seeds, when they sprouted, so that way you know your weekly fertilizing schedule. And so this is something that I'm going to be adding into my journal, so that way I can be triggered on when I need to be adding a week fertilizer. And once that 2-week mark hits where you're giving them that first feeding, you're going to want to keep feeding them every 2 weeks after that until they're ready to go outside. And again, onions are quite cold hardy, so you are going to be able to plant them out as soon as the soil is workable, and they can handle some light frost or freezing. But if you have any cover, you can also grow them under cover. And when you do plant them outside, you want to make sure that the roots are just barely covered and the rest of the plant is above the soil. And so that's another important reason why you're starting them now, is because they can go out early. And because they are such big water hogs, you do want to make sure that you're always weeding around them, because they don't want any competition with weeds or other plants, which is again the mistake that I made in previous years. And so onions are on my list in my square foot garden planner. If you haven't grabbed that yet, it's an interactive tool that I built and it's perfect for this time of the year. And so if you wanted to grab that, I'm going to put a little visual up here so you can see what it is, but it's a tool that helps you plan how to put your plants into a square foot type of gardening if you garden that way. If you don't, I highly recommend gardening in square foot, because you can fit a ton of plants in a really small space. And what you can do in this tool is you can choose your plants and it'll tell you how many plants can fit in a square foot. And at the same time, it's actually building a list on the right-hand side that either is how many seeds you need to start or how many seedlings you're going to have to buy, which is a great way to budget your garden as well, or plan how many seeds that you need. And so I am going to be putting that in so that way I know how many onions I can fit at the allotment, which I'm really excited for, because this is the most amount of space that I've ever had for onions. And the goal is to try and make enough onions and cure them so that way I can have onions for the whole year, because I found in the past year that the onions at the grocery store were really poor quality. So I'm hoping that I can be able to grow my own and keep them well over the winter time, so that way I'm not left choosing between the best of the worst at the grocery store. All right, so depending on where you live, you're gonna wanna plant them out in March or April. And of course, you want to make sure that you don't plant them too deep, since the bulb of the onion is growing at the top of the onion. And if you have any type of cover, you are going to want to cover up the seedlings overnight just to make sure that they don't die, but they again are cold hardy. When you do plant them outside, make sure to plant them 4 to 6 inches apart, so that way they have space to grow their nice big bulb. And then mulch around the seedlings, because it's important to keep the cold out and keep the moisture in, since they are such water-loving plants. And again, having a schedule is really important, because 3 weeks after planting them out, you're going to want to fertilize them again. And when you fertilize them that 3 weeks later, you're going to start on a 2-week fertilizing schedule after that. So this is why it's important to have your garden journal, so you can document all of this. And you want to use either a slow release fertilizer or a natural fertilizer that you have at home that is high in nitrogen. And there are some pests for onions, but they aren't too bad. I've never had any issues with pests on my onions, but if this is something that worries you, you can cover them in insect netting, since they don't require any pollinators in order to grow and produce fruit. So I do have another video on how to use insect netting, which I will link in the description below for you. And this is a great way to cover your crops and prevent any type of pest from coming on your onions. And especially I'm going to be using that for me, since my onions will be growing as a monoculture. I'm not going to be intercropping them. I'm going to be growing them beside my garlic, and neither of those need any type of pollination. So I am going to put insect netting on that entire row just to protect them from any type of moths or other pests that are going to damage them. And of course, onions need water. They love water. I'm hammering this in to you and to me that they need a good watering schedule in order to grow. And so it's really important that you never let them dry out. So if you are having a dry season, make sure to go out. And if you're not watering the rest of your garden, just go out and water your onions. And so that is going to be my biggest challenge because I don't go to the allotment as frequently as I do my home garden. And so I am gonna have to go more frequently to make sure that these onions do well. So the 3 key things to good onions is loose soil, a good watering schedule, and a good fertilizing schedule. So these are 3 things that you want to keep at the top of your mind in order to produce big, good onions that you can harvest and store over the winter. And in terms of fertilizing, as soon as you see your onions starting to produce their bulb, stop fertilizing and stick with your watering schedule only. And then onions are really easy to know when they're ready to harvest because their green tops start falling over. So when about 50% of your onion tops have tipped over, it means it's time to harvest them. And in the summer, in the meantime, I actually really like to harvest my onion greens for food if I'm making a sandwich or anything that could use the nice green onion tops on them. I don't chop off a lot of the onion top, but maybe the first couple inches, and they make for really good garnish on top of food. And so this is just another way that you could be using your onions while you're growing them. And since I can only show you how to plant onions right now, I can't show you how it looks to harvest them because of course it's the middle of winter right now. And so I am going to be making follow-up videos on how the progress is going with them, how my watering schedule and my feeding schedule is going. And I'm hoping that come middle of summer or fall, I'll be able to show you guys some onions. And this way I can turn my $3 seed packet into $100 worth of onions that will save me all winter long, and I don't have to buy them. And that is what I'm looking forward to the most. And I hope you found this video really helpful. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out this next video that I have here. Thanks for watching. Bye.